they're still very far apart. That hasn't changed.
Right. It's an unbridgeable gulf. The only thing that will bring the United States around is when the economic crisis becomes so deep and the need to get a normality restored to the Strait of Hormuz becomes so great that then Trump will blink and they'll begin making the concessions they need to make. But by then, frankly, it's going to be too late. The damage to the global economy is done. It's now baked in. And the combination, the biggest thing that really ought to worry people is the loss of fertilizer, the global loss of fertilizer, upwards of a third, 1/3 of percent, which means there's going to be less land put into productive activities like growing crops, and there will be fewer crops to harvest, which means, less rice, less corn, less wheat. And then, people wanting to get fed, they're going to face skyrocketing prices with those commodities, and they're going to experience shortages, just like the shortages with oil are now showing up.
Yeah, and a guest told me that one of the deals that Trump reached in China was for China to buy more American soybeans. Well, the problem now is that with the shortage with fertilizers, especially if this continues, the farmers don't even have enough fertilizers to be able to produce the soybeans that China apparently wants to buy from the US based on the deal. So it's just, everything's just not going in his favor across all fronts.
Well, in this deal, China didn't say, yeah, we're going to buy 25 million bushels. They didn't say anything like that at all.
They said everything's preliminary. They did the opposite,
they just expressed, we're willing to consider buying some of your soybeans, provided all these other areas of concern that we've raised are taken care of. But, we're able to buy all the soybeans we need right now from Brazil. It's the U.S. farmer that needs the Chinese purchase. China doesn't need it. China was doing it in the past basically to help the United States out. And I think they're now in a very different mindset. They don't want to help the United States at all, other than telling the United States, lift your blockade, get the hell out of the Middle East.
Talking about China, let me read this out for you. Trump's visit to Beijing was a symbol of declining American power. That's according to analysis by The Atlantic. Wow. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's The Atlantic. Trump's visit to Beijing was a symbol of declining American power, with China merely entertaining the president without offering any real concessions. I'll read out a quote from the article. Franklin Foer writes that despite lavish protocols and ceremonies, the Xi-Trump meeting yielded no significant political or economic achievements for Washington.
Right.
The article states, quote, when America extends its hand, no one rushes to grasp it anymore. And when it threatens, no one feels fear anymore. Xi not only refrained from presenting a specific plan to end the Iran war, but also refused to sign a major trade agreement or provide guarantees on U.S. access to rare earth minerals. Wow.
Yeah.
That's coming from The Atlantic. I'll read this quote again. It's an important one. When America extends its hand, no one rushes to grasp it anymore. And when it threatens, no one feels fear anymore. Wow.
Yeah. The United States has done this to itself. You can only be a bully so long before somebody steps up to punch you back in the nose and put you in your place. And the United States tried to bully China. And China, instead of getting mad and throwing a temper tantrum, they just said, okay, we don't need to buy soybeans from the United States. They got plenty in Brazil. We'll buy it from Brazil. In fact, when we make that transfer, it's going to be with our respective currencies. So when they stop buying soybeans in the US dollars, that means the demand for dollar goes down. Well, and there's this enormous supply of dollars out there. So its value of the US dollar is going down, which over the long term, you could argue would make American products cheaper, except many of those products, particularly in the military realm that we want to produce, we cannot produce because we don't have the rare earth minerals, which China controls. And China was quite content, said, okay, the United States wants to be mad and be a bully, fine, we'll just ignore them.
Another piece of development that kind of highlights the multipolar world that we're heading into. Canada's deepening Arctic defense cooperation with Nordic countries as concerns grow over relying too heavily on the US amid Trump's negative comment about Greenland and Canada. So that's according to Reuters. Ottawa is expanding military ties with Denmark, Finland, Norway, Sweden, and Iceland, while helping Greenland build a local force modeled on Canada's Arctic Rangers, which maintain a permanent presence in remote Arctic communities. Prime Minister Carney says Canada still values NORAD, but wants stronger partnerships among middle powers, while officials cite rising concerns over Arctic security and Russian activity. So now you've got Canada diversifying, indications of it diversifying away from the US. Same as what we're seeing in the Gulf. It's moving really quickly, so quickly under this administration. We've got this report from Canada. We've got Europe talking about building a European army. Well, it's called NATO, but building another European army. And then you've got the Gulf talking about building an alliance there or diversifying to Turkey and Pakistan.
Yeah, I don't know what military options the folks in Europe actually think they have. They do not have adequate manpower. We know that. Their industrial base has been stripped bare. And so they're not in a position where they can just ramp up production of, guns, tanks, bombs, etc. So, a lot of this is posturing. This trying to pretend that they've got some power and that trying to scare Iran. And I don't think Iran is being frightened at all by this.
I don't think Europe's more trying to cause deterrence against Russia, not to avoid Russia attacking them, which, by the way, I'm going to ask you a few questions on later. Some reports came in that you know what I'm talking about, but more about kind of showing strength and unity, really. But I know short term they can't do much. But let's not forget the Europe 20 years ago. That can happen again in 20 years if they fix their approach to their interests, and especially when it comes to energy, and more importantly, just figure out how Brussels works and makes it more efficient, less bickering and red tape. If they improve these processes, I know they don't have a lot of natural resources, but they're pretty advanced economies. They've got the tech sector has potential, even though they screwed the hell out of it over the last couple of decades. Yeah. I just think I'm hoping, again, I could be disappointed again for another 20 years, that Europe reemerges with at least a bit more influence in the world. If we're talking about a multipolar world, I'd like one of those poles to be Europe with different foreign policy approach, no longer looking at Russia as an enemy. I think that's important as well.
So what would be the foundation of that power? Is it economic in terms of what does Europe produce that the rest of the world needs? Answer is not much.
But that's what they have to pick up. They have to reindustrialize. Similar to talking about the US. It's a long-term thing. I'm not saying they're able to do it, but Germany was a manufacturing hub not long ago, so they were there. So it's about getting back to that position, but it involves reevaluating. Like, for example, if they reevaluate their relationship with Russia post-Ukraine war, and somehow improve it. Again, I know it sounds unimaginable now, but unimaginable sometimes becomes reality. Improve it, then that helps them on the energy front. And they're pretty good when it comes to technology. They've got a lot of talent in the country that has really been drained to the US and other countries. So educational industry is not bad. Financial sector is good. So I just hope they can build it up again. That's coming from someone that lived in Europe for many years. So, and I love the culture there.
But that's where we need to step back and take a look and say, okay, what are they really doing? They are becoming more threatening of Russia. They've expanded their production of drones and that are being used to attack Russia. And Russia, I don't know if you've ever interviewed Ambassador Polyansky, who used to be the number 2 guy at the UN ambassador, Russia's UN mission. But Ambassador Polyansky is now over in Switzerland. And he was on Danny Davis's podcast yesterday or Friday. And
a couple of days ago.
Yeah, he's been very direct that, hey, it's highly likely that Russia is going to have to launch attacks in Europe in order to defend itself. And it's important to understand that Polyansky doesn't have the kind of political stature like Lavrov, where Lavrov could say something that he may not have coordinated with Putin, but it would still garner respect. No, he doesn't have that clout. So, I mean, when Polyansky's saying this, he's basically saying it with the blessing of Lavrov and Putin. That's what's important to understand. So it wasn't just he doesn't carry the weight where on his own he could just say this. He's a cautious. I don't want to say it. He's a cautious diplomat. He's a true professional, but he's also not yet of the stature that he could go off and be saying these things just on his own. So when he said that, my ears perked up and went, "Holy smokes!"
It's in line with what Karaganov also said.